So, I live in suburban paradise, also known as the Coves at Swan Ridge. The grass is a chemically enforced shade of emerald, the houses are beige with tasteful white trim, and the excitement level peaks when someone puts their recycling bin out before 5 p.m. I'm not a rebel by nature. I like a tidy lawn, but I also like a little personality, a little joy. Enter Barnaby. Barnaby was a garden gnome my 5-year-old daughter, Lily, won at a school fair. He wasn't fancy. He was a portly, cheerful little fellow with a slightly lopsided red hat and a fishing pole. Lily adored him. She'd help him fish in the decorative pondless waterfall feature. HOA approved model #4B every afternoon, having long conversations with him about the imaginary, brilliantly colored fish he was catching. For 3 glorious weeks, Barnaby was a beloved citizen of 1243 Swan Ridge Drive. He witnessed sidewalk chalk masterpieces and supervised lemonade stands. He was, in my completely unbiased opinion, a net positive for the neighborhood's morale. And then the sky fell. It arrived on crisp, expensive linen paper, slipped into our mailbox with a definitive thwomp. The HOA violation notice. The paper itself felt accusatory. From the Board of the Coves at Swan Ridge HOA, Brenda McLemore, President. T.O., the resident of 1243 Swan Ridge Drive. Subject: Violation prohibited lawn figurine. Dear resident, it has come to our attention that your property is in violation of Community Bylaw Section 12, Paragraph C, lawn ornaments and exterior decor. Asterisk specifically, you are harboring a non-conforming gnome or dwarf-like figure within the front yard aesthetic zone. Such items are deemed tacky, unsettling, and detrimental to property values. Asterisk, you have 48 hours to remove the offending item. Failure to comply will result in a fine of $50, accruing daily. Asterisk, sincerely, Brenda McLemore. Asterisk HOA President. My first instinct was to be reasonable. I called the number on the letter. Brenda McLemore. A voice answered, sharp enough to slice bread. Hi Brenda. It's Alex from 1243 Swan Ridge. I got your letter about the garden gnome. Asterisk the asterisk gnome, yes. The violation, right? It's my daughter's. It's very small. It brings her a lot of happiness. Happiness isn't in the bylaws, Alex. Aesthetics are. That thing is an eyesore. Remove it. With all due respect, Brenda, I've seen flamingo welcome mats and those weird spinning metal sunflowers on the street. How is this different? Those are pre-approved, tasteful accents. Your item is not. The decision is final. Remove it or be fined. Click. I showed Sarah the letter. Her smile vanished. She called Barnaby unsettling? He's the least unsettling thing on this street. What about Gary's lawn jockey? That's unsettling. Gary is on the board. I sighed. Different rules. This is where something switched in me. I'm a network engineer by trade. My whole job is about building logical, resilient systems and documenting every step. Brenda's logic was flawed, corrupted, and I don't tolerate corrupted systems. You don't just yell at a server until it works. You diagnose the root failure. I didn't remove Barnaby. I documented. I took a time-stamped photo of him on the porch, with Lily giving him a hug, a picture of pure, defiant joy. I printed out Brenda's letter, the absurdity of its language preserved in ink. I started a physical folder, labeling it with a sense of grim satisfaction, the gnome files. The next day, another linen paper missile arrived. The fine, $50. Attached was a grainy telephoto lens picture of Barnaby, shot from the street like he was a target in a spy thriller. The pettiness was breathtaking. I paid the fine. It felt like paying a ransom, a bitter pill to swallow, but I did it. And then I went to the county clerk's office and got a full official copy of the HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions. My bedtime reading had just gotten a lot less interesting and a lot more strategic. The audit had begun. While Lily and Barnaby continued their daily fishing expeditions, I plunged into the thrilling world of bylaws. Evenings that were once for Netflix were now spent cross-referencing subsections with a highlighter and a growing sense of disbelief. It was a desert of legalese, but I, a connoisseur of technical manuals, started to find oases of useful absurdity. For instance, Bylaw 12, paragraph C, the very one I was violating, also stated in no uncertain terms, *, no freestanding figurines shall exceed 18 inches in height. *, I got out a tape measure. Barnaby was a stout 11 inches from his booted feet to the tip of his cheerful hat. Checkmate? Not quite. The tacky and unsettling clause was a subjective black hole, and Brenda was the singularity at its center. She could simply say he was tacky, and that was that. But I kept digging. My inner engineer treating the CC and RS like a buggy piece of code I needed to debug, and in the deep, dusty sections, I found gold. Buried in Section 28, Architectural Control, was a clause stating that any external modification, including the installation of permanent outdoor lighting, fencing, or communication equipment, required pre-approval from the Architectural Committee. Communication equipment. The phrase glowed on the page. What kind of communication equipment, you ask? Like, say, a massive 15-foot satellite dish bolted to your roof? I took a walk that evening, my dog giving me a confused look as we deviated from our normal route. And there it was, impossible to miss. A giant, white, 1990s-era satellite dish, like a mechanical mushroom, bolted to the side of Brenda McLemore's own pristine house. It was huge. It was definitely not tasteful or aesthetic. I'd never seen the HOA Architectural Committee minutes approving a giant satellite dish. Probably because that committee was Brenda, her husband, and her best friend, Carol. They had exempted themselves from the very rules they weaponized. The hypocrisy wasn't just a spark. It was a raging fire. I took out my phone and snapped a picture. The GNOME files had just gotten a major new exhibit. The fines kept coming. A new linen envelope of disappointment arrived every other day. A grimly predictable meteor shower of pettiness. $50 a day. We were at $350 and climbing. Sarah was getting anxious, the stress lines around her eyes deepening each time the mail truck arrived. Alex, this is getting ridiculous. It's just a GNOME. It's not worth a second mortgage on our sanity. It's not about the GNOME anymore, honey, I said. My eyes glued to the CC and RS spread across the kitchen table like a battle map. It's about the principal and the satellite dish. She's built her own gallows. I just need to make sure she's the one who swings. This was no longer a defense. It was an audit. And a good audit requires a comprehensive review of the entire system. I began expanding my investigation under the guise of taking my dog, Loki, on more exploratory walks. We would coincidentally amble past the homes of other HOA board members, Loki sniffing fire hydrants while I discreetly snapped photos with my phone. The results were staggering. Gary, the guy with the unquestioned lawn jockey, his prized 6-foot privacy fence was a clear violation of the 5.5-foot maximum. I measured the shadow it cast against a known object. 6 inches of pure, unapproved arrogance. Carol, Brenda's bestie and fellow enforcer? She ran a small crafting business from her garage, with a constant stream of customers and UPS trucks. A blatant violation of the No Commercial Enterprise Clause. I had time-stamped photos of a dozen different cars in a single hour. I had a dossier, a beautiful, petty, ironclad dossier of hypocrisy. I requested a formal hearing at the next HOA board meeting. My request was acknowledged with a terse email from Brenda that dripped with condescension. Your grievance regarding the unauthorized lawn figurine will be heard. You have 10 minutes. She thought she was still setting the terms. She had no idea she was walking into a trap I'd built with her own rulebook. The community clubhouse was packed, buzzing with a tense, nervous energy. It seemed my GNOME case had become the unlikely Super Bowl of suburban drama. Brenda sat at the head of a long table, flanked by her loyal lieutenants, Gary and Carol. She had a gavel. I'm not kidding, a full-sized, polished wooden gavel, which she smacked with unnecessary force, presiding over our HOA meeting like she was a judge on a cable TV courtroom show. We'll now hear from Alex Henderson regarding his repeated and willful violation of Bylaw 12C, Brenda announced, her voice cutting through the murmur. She made it sound like I'd been running a meth lab next to the gnome. I stood up, my folder feeling solid and reassuring in my hands. I was calm. My job involves explaining complex, multi-million-dollar network failures to panicked CEOs. This was, frankly, a welcome decrease in stakes. Thank you, Brenda. As you know, this is about my daughter's garden gnome. I'd like to point out for the record that the gnome is under the 18-inch height restriction clearly stated in the very same bylaw. Brenda smirked, a practiced expression of weary superiority. The tacky and unsettling clause overrides that, Alex. It's a matter of taste and community standards. I see, I said, nodding thoughtfully as if she'd made a brilliant point. So it's about enforcing the rules. Selectively. About applying your personal taste as law. The room, which had been rustling, went pin-drop quiet. You could hear a pin drop on the plush beige carpet. What is that supposed to mean? She snapped, her smirk vanishing. Well, while researching the bylaws to better understand our shared community standards, I noticed a few other interesting applications of the rules. I opened my folder with a deliberate theatrical flourish. The paper rustled loudly in the silence. This was my moment. The trap was sprung. The meeting ended in glorious, beautiful disarray. Brenda, her face a magnificent mottled shade of purple, had shrieked, "This hearing is adjourned," over the rising tumult of the crowd, smacking her gavel so hard the head flew off and ricocheted off Gary's water glass. She then stormed out, a whirlwind of fuchsia outrage, with Carol and Gary scrambling after her. I packed my folder slowly, a small, satisfied smile on my face. Neighbors I'd only ever nodded at were now patting me on the back, whispering, "About time someone said it," and, "That satellite dish is a monstrosity." For 2 days, I was the unofficial hero of Swan Ridge. The wind was at my back, but I had profoundly underestimated the depth of Brenda's pettiness and the sheer, unhinged nature of a cornered tyrant. It happened at 2:17 p.m. on a Wednesday. I was in a deep flow state, configuring a firewall for a new client. My screens flickered once, twice, and then went black. All of them. The hum of the network switch in the corner fell silent. The internet was not just slow. It was dead. A cold dread trickled down my spine. My entire livelihood was digital. I called the provider. After navigating an automated maze and a 20-minute hold, a flustered technician came back on the line. Sir? It says here your dedicated fiber line was voluntarily terminated this afternoon. At the request of the HOA board president. A Brenda McLemore? She faxed over HOA documentation claiming it was an unauthorized installation, and that you were in flagrant violation of community aesthetic standards. She said she had the authority. My blood ran cold. She hadn't just cut my internet. She had cut my throat professionally. And in her petty, narrow-minded rage, she had done something so colossally stupid I almost couldn't process it. My line was the neighborhood's trunk connection. By killing my unauthorized line, she had, in one fell swoop, also severed the connection to the low-profile police substation 3 streets over. Brenda McLemore had just declared war on emergency services. I looked at my watch. 2:19 p.m. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. In my line of work, you plan for catastrophic failure. You build in redundancies. I had a backup. Of course I had a backup. I walked calmly to my garage, past the shelves of paint cans and holiday decorations, to a large, locked Pelican case. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, was a piece of equipment most civilians aren't allowed to own. A satellite modem about the size of a textbook with a clear line to a federal emergency and disaster response network. I do high-level contract work for them, and as part of our strict continuity of government protocols, I was issued one for scenarios exactly like this. Total malicious comms blackout. By 2:21 p.m., I had the heavy case on my desk. I flipped the latches, the sound sharp and purposeful. I connected the power, then ran a single Ethernet cable from the modem to my primary router. The device whirred to life, a small, sturdy antenna deploying with a quiet servomotor whine. A single LED began to blink amber, then glowed a steady, reassuring green as it locked onto its designated satellite. At 2:23 p.m., precisely 4 minutes after my world went dark, I watched my monitor flicker back to life. I had a secure, encrypted, and frankly blazingly fast internet connection. I was back online. The entire infrastructure of my professional life was now being piped through a federal backup network. All because an HOA president threw a tantrum. My first call wasn't to the internet provider. It was a secure VoIP call to my direct contact at the agency, a brilliantly no-nonsense woman named Maria. Maria, it's Alex Henderson. My primary fiber was intentionally severed by a local HOA president. She also, and I cannot stress this enough, cut the fiber to the local police substation. Yes, the police. There was a pause on the other end. I could almost hear the silent, profound scream of bureaucratic fury. She did what? Maria finally said, her voice dangerously calm. Give me the address. What happened next was a symphony of bureaucratic and legal consequences, and it was beautiful. At 2:27 p.m., for minutes after I rerouted through the federal backup network, I saw 2 police cruisers from the main station, since their local substation was still in a digital coma. Roll slowly down the street, their lights off but their purpose clear. They stopped directly in front of Brenda's house. From my office window with a pair of binoculars, for bird watching of course, I had a prime, unobstructed view. Brenda was on her porch, already gesturing wildly before the officers were even fully out of their cars. I later found out from a neighbor who was conveniently walking his dog within earshot that the conversation went something like this. Officer *, ma'am, we're investigating a malicious disruption of critical communications infrastructure. We understand you contacted the provider and ordered a disconnect at this address. Brenda *, it was an unauthorized installation, a blatant violation. I have the authority as president to uphold our standards. Officer *, ma'am, you do not have the authority to interrupt emergency services. Impeding law enforcement communications is a felony. The color drained from her face. It was a sight to behold, even from a distance. The defiant posture crumpled into stunned disbelief. By that evening, a crew from the internet provider was on my street, working with frantic urgency to restore the fiber line. The provider's regional manager called me personally to apologize, his voice trembling. Brenda was removed as HOA president by a unanimous emergency vote of the remaining board members, who were terrified of being implicated. The new board, in one of their first acts, threw out all the petty fines, including mine. They even passed a Barnaby amendment, allowing for a reasonable number of small, non-offensive lawn ornaments. Barnaby now sits proudly on our porch, a tiny ceramic hero who brought down a tyrant. Lily is happy. Sarah is relieved. And me? I sometimes look at the pelican case in my garage and smile. You don't bring a gavel to a satellite fight. And as for Brenda, let's just say her house just went on the market. And the listing photo very carefully avoids showing the giant, unauthorized satellite dish on the roof. Justice served petty, and with a federal-grade backup connection.